Hello, everyone, and welcome to another interview with our cannabis industry power players. Today, I am sitting down with Melissa Moore. Melissa is the Director of Civil Systems Reform at the Drug Policy Alliance and has experience in criminal justice reform and community led development. Welcome, Melissa.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here.
Yes, we're very excited to have you. Can I ask first about your background and experience and how you became involved in the Drug Policy Alliance?
Yeah, so I mean, I've worked for several different nonprofits and also have a background in editing, but we really brought it together with Drug Policy Alliance. I had worked in my previous role at a different organization with Cassandra Frederique, who at that time was the director of DPA in New York State, was leading the campaign against the marijuana arrest crusade, and also working on overdose issues in the state, really anything and everything drug policy oriented. And I saw that work that was being done on the ground in New York State, how DPA was really connecting the dots between what's seen as traditional criminal justice reform, as well as public health endeavors around overdose, and also just the ways in which people's lives are upended by criminalization in so many other facets. Just looking at the way that DPA was connecting these different nexus points in a way that was truly unique made me want to work with the organization. And I'm so glad that I made the jump and that they would have me.
Yeah, it's really impressive work and so important too. So I'm hoping you can tell us just a little bit more about two of the projects that you worked on: the Start Smart campaign and End Overdose New York.
Absolutely. So with the Start Smart campaign, it really grew out of DPA and our allies' previous efforts around marijuana reform in New York State. Recognizing that despite the fact that New York actually decriminalized marijuana and was one of the first states to do so back in 1977 after the Rockefeller drug laws, we still had a situation where in the previous 25 years, there were more than 800,000 people arrested on low level marijuana charges in New York State, the vast majority of whom were Black and Latinx, despite the fact that people use cannabis at pretty much the same rate across populations. So, that really led to DPA's work around ending the marijuana arrest crusade, trying to stop that harm that was happening in communities and to remove that tool that was being used by law enforcement to target people and to upend their lives. And then also working on the medical marijuana campaign in New York State. My colleagues who previously worked at the New York State office led that campaign, got it over the finish line, but it was a much smaller program than what they had envisioned and what patients really needed across the state. And this is around the time that we also see different states across the country legalizing cannabis for adult use. And so that really formed the Start Smart campaign. And we did anything and everything we possibly could to move the dial in Albany and actually across the country, it turned out, because we really centered the campaign on racial and economic justice. And the campaign that we led was really rooted in making sure that there was restitution, because we know that the harm of prohibition had impacted New Yorkers all across the state, but had done so in really disproportionate ways. And so, building the Start Smart campaign in such a way that people who tended to be pushed to the margins in other aspects of either organizing or just society in New York would actually be at the very center and at the core of the values of the campaign that we were running, made a huge difference there.
Definitely, definitely. And it really was organizations like the Drug Policy Alliance that paved the way for, the social equity aspects of the MRTA, which passed last year, to be taken really seriously.
Absolutely. I mean, when we look at just the fact pattern in New York of who has been the most harmed and the communities that were the most devastated by criminalization and prohibition, it's certainly Black and Latinx New Yorkers all across the state. And so, in crafting the MRTA, wanting to be, really certain that we were putting in provisions that centered social equity, and not just in a way that was giving lip service, but truly addressing a lot of the barriers that we've seen in other states. New York has the benefit here of not being the first state to move, much to our chagrin, but it actually gives us a lot to work with in terms of what we've seen about adult use playing out elsewhere. So that's where, things like the incubator program come into play that'll actually have the ability to give low and zero interest loans to social equity participants. Having the technical assistance and legal counsel as part of the social equity incubator as well is really important. And in terms of how the MRTA is already playing out, of course, we're waiting for the regulations for the actual sale component, but there's been a tremendous impact already just from removing cannabis from the criminal penal code in terms of low-level possession under 3 ounces, and also removing cannabis odor as a justification for a stop and a search, and allowing for public consumption in anywhere that smoking tobacco would be allowed. All of those things have combined to really, really shrink the scope of how law enforcement can impact individuals and entire communities. Whereas before they were using cannabis as the excuse, oftentimes, for unconstitutional stops and searches. That activity has really had to change because of the MRTA becoming law, and that to me is a tremendous impact that we're really proud of.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. I think one of the silver linings to New York maybe not being the first to tackle this is that we are able to learn from other states and to kind of have these observations that we're then able to incorporate, which is so important. So a lot of work still to be done in this coming year. What are you most excited for in 2022?
I think, of course, there's hopefully going to be movement around the regulations, actually getting the market up and running. But what I'm most excited about are actually things that tend to be a little bit more overlooked or more invisibilized. The fact that due to what is in the MRTA, people can't be drug tested for marijuana as a condition of getting a job. Just removing that barrier in people's lives is going to be huge. And that's already part of the law. Removing, again, one of the tools that was used to criminalize immigrants in this country and lead to a lot of deportations has been radically changed in New York. We need action still at the federal level, so I'm really excited about that, and seeing the energy from the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, seeing Cory Booker and Senator Wyden as well, being really involved in talking about how do we move cannabis reform at the federal level in a way that's also responsive to communities and really covers a lot of the bases of what we need to see happen.
Yeah, definitely. And hopefully New York can be, a bellwether or an example for how other states can go about this in a really thoughtful way. So yeah, thank you so much, Melissa. It's been absolutely wonderful. So much to think about and look forward to. We'll definitely keep an eye on you and keep an eye on the Drug Policy Alliance.
Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.